Most listeners know I used to run for my university team when I went to Concordia University. Because we only officially had cross country due to budget, our coach at the time had tried different things to keep us running year round. One year, he created his own club called Montreal Endurance. We had very limited, very minimal club fees. So we actually ended up sewing our own singlets with fabric that was like left over from some clothing manufacturer, or I don't know, maybe he got it discounted or something. Anyway, also the singlets for women and men were not the same color because we didn't have enough fabric of the same color to make singlets for the whole team. So I think the men had orange and the women had like dark blue. Also, one of the students was in fine arts, and so she knew how to do silk screen printing, and that's how we got the logo on the singlets that we had sewn ourselves. So this was like a great adventure. Despite all the effort, we still didn't have a track to train on in the winter. So about a year later, Coach John decided to join McGill University coaching roster to coach the this kind of like the open club version of McGill University because they have a varsity team which was like track and field cross country. You had to obviously be fast and be in the top I don't know whatever amount they took, but there were always more runners around than that. And so they also had kind of like an overflow team called McGill Olympic. So John decided to become the coach of McGill Olympic, and that way we had access to the track in the winter once a week. And we ended up making a lot of new friends because we would get, like I said, some of the McGill students that didn't make the varsity squad, or just some people that walked off the street, or maybe just students that went to McGill and they preferred to run other races. Anyway, one of the guys that joined us, although I'm not really sure of the timeline exactly, turns out to be the son of today's author.
Ooh.
Yeah. So you'll just have to listen to the rest of the podcast to hear more about that. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk with author Stephen Kelly about his book, Stroke of Luck.
Stroke of Luck, My Life in Amateur Athletics, is a chronicle of passion and rediscovery, the emotional story of a dedicated, competitive runner, Stephen Kelly, whose participation in the sport spans 50 years. As a teenager, Steve searches for his niche while dealing with challenges that will be familiar to many families. After he discovers his running, it soon becomes part of his identity. Steve's adventure takes him across North America and Europe, and he fulfills a lifelong dream by running in the 2001 Boston Marathon. Along the way, Steve comes to realize that much of his personal success is due to the enduring presence of running in his life. A series of strokes threaten not only Steve's athletic pursuits, but his life. By eventually returning to the road, he realizes new opportunities for growth. We're looking forward to hearing all about that. First, let me tell you a little bit about Stephen Kelly himself. Steve is a semi-retired chemical engineer and a dedicated amateur runner who has competed in road races for almost 50 years. He grew up in a working-class city in Ontario. I guess that was Hamilton, Ontario. Telling the story of his recovery from a series of strokes has allowed Steve to pursue another one of his lifelong interests, non-fiction writing. He lives in Calgary, Alberta, and while he still enjoys running along the river pathways, it's now at a somewhat slower pace and usually includes photography, a new passion. Oh no, you
Maybe
and
we get to talk about that too.
Liz is a passionate photographer as well. So welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. Appreciate the chance to chat with you.
We definitely appreciate you being with us because, we know we ask for kind of like a significant chunk of time in your schedule. So thanks for being here. First question we always ask is just because writing a book is such a big undertaking, how did you decide to write this book?
Well, it was a bit of I would say an organic process, actually. I mean, for years in my running group, I would say maybe known for writing little race reports. So we would go to a race, and I liked writing a little summary of the race. And people would say to me, "Oh, I really liked your race report." Because to me, it was about the story. Like I would tell not so much about the performance necessarily, but more like the story behind the race. So it was always this idea of writing these little things. And I realized I had accumulated quite a number of these things over the years. And I originally had this idea of putting just a series of these little running anecdotes together into a book. And I actually kind of sketched it out. And then I decided I didn't have enough drama in the story. Like otherwise it would have just read as a series of running race reports, which, some people might enjoy that, but it did. So I put it aside, but I always liked writing. And then in 2017, after I had this medical adventure, the idea never went away. In fact, my wife jokes because she said the first thing I asked for when I was in the hospital was a notebook because I wanted to write what was
Oh,
happening.
wow.
And so I ended up with all these notes and recollections from that episode. And anyway, it dawned on me that that was the drama I might need for the story. So I then kind of said, well, what would it take to write a real book? So I kind of set off on that path, and it took its own course. I mean, I didn't know how to write a book or edit a book or design a book, but I kind of just figured it all out. And next thing I knew, I had a book. So then the publishing decision, go, no go, came up, and I'm glad I decided to go ahead with it. I mean, it was an adventure in itself, just writing the book.
Yeah.
I guess the book itself is kind of a memoir. I mean, it talks about your life from an early age. Was that deliberate? You're trying to sort of encapsulate your life story
Well,
as well as significant events.
yes, I mean, and I like talking as well and telling stories and stuff, but in that regard, and I appreciate you asking that question because my cousin, who's still actually my cousin in Hamilton, so I grew up in Hamilton, but my cousin lives in my grandmother's house, and she's the oldest of all the cousins, and so she's always been kind of I would say like the mentor for all of us, and she still is. And so she had a life as a school teacher in Hamilton. Anyway, she was really keen on this idea of me writing a book. Like it became almost like she couldn't wait to see the book. So I gave her an early version of it, and I had written quite a bit about the family and us growing up and so on. But I was a bit nervous about putting that in. Like, frankly, it's a running book, so shouldn't it just be about running? And so I couldn't wait to chat with my cousin Brenda, and I said, "Well, what do you think about all that background stuff?" And she said, "I love it. To her, that was the best part of the book." And she said, "I've never read a book about our time and place in Hamilton, growing up and the family and all that. And you should put more of it in." And she kind of helped me kind of sharpen it up a little bit. But in the end, I was on the fence about that. But I realized that that was part of making me who I was. And I had to leave it in because to me, it was telling the story of how did I even get to the point where running became important to me. And I realized it was a lot of my family background and the kind of the traits that my parents had given me fed right into the strengths and weaknesses of well, you guys know about what it takes to be a competitive runner or even just a fun runner. I mean, you have to bring certain things to the table, and I felt like that had to be told. It was part of my story.
Yeah, I think that because we read quite a few running books and some of them are like more strictly running and have very little background story. And I think what ends up happening is that yeah, I guess if you're looking for like just motivation about running and to like being a runner, then it's fine. But I think that like if you're going to be a lifelong runner, like I think it's kind of useful to see that most of the time, it's not just like it was just always there at the same level, always doing the same thing. Like it's got kind of ebbs and flows and like seasonality, which I think that it kind of gets lost in this idea of because I've been running for a long time, and so like I know that what the last place where I was working, I used to sometimes run to work because it's not that far. It was like 6 kilometers, so run 6 kilometers, hang up my sweaty things somewhere in a corner where no one else could see them or smell them, and then at the end of the day, I have to put them all back on so I could run back home. And so like I was just like kind of like the crazy person in the office, but people were just sort of like, she's just been running her whole life. Like n normal people can't do that. And it's like so untrue. And it's not
Yeah.
that like I was always that crazy person, like I ran in high school. I stopped running because the pressure was too much. I came back to running a few years later. Like I ran several years without racing because like racing was too much pressure and I didn't know how to deal with it. I came back to racing and it's like this idea, like through your story, like you explain that, like, you were running and later in life you end up being coached, which is sort of like,
Yeah.
well, you had all this experience. I think that sometimes people get sort of blocked where they're like, yeah, but I've been running for so long. Why would I need a coach now?
Right.
And you describe that like you were sort of the same and you ended up getting a coach and you learned some new things and I don't know, it evolved but in a different way and the idea of getting older and that you no longer get faster but you still get benefit from running.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know, I like the backstory, all that to say. Um
Well,
and
it's
I think it's like sort of it's sort of the relatable part and I think that let's say you have somebody that's like really deep into running right now, but for them to be able to realize that it's okay if sometimes, it takes a bit of a back seat, like if
absolutely.
your career is too demanding. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly had those ups and downs, those ebbs and flows, as you mentioned, and but for me, it was a case where running was always there. I describe it as my refuge. And I learned this maybe early on, I wasn't a good enough runner to compete in university. The varsity team was an aspiration, but I had to realize, look, that's not for you. I mean, you're a student more than a.
Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
and there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's caffeine bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. So, and it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor, and they're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the
Speaking of which, back to the podcast. Except also in your generation, probably it was very competitive to run at the university level more than now.
Like running has changed so much, as you probably would agree. But I mean, early on, when you ran, it was the domain of good runners. Like you didn't,
Hmm.
if you couldn't run well. And so I was never a star. And I mean, from the story, my brother was a star, and it didn't matter to me. Like eventually I learned that that's fine. Running has its place and it's a very important, maybe secondary thing in my life, but it's always there and it's got to be there. And And when I have the time and I can fit it into my life, it is a dominant thing of my existence. You know, I'm training for a race. I'm in full on race mode, you know. But there are other times like when my kids were young and I remember going to a race after like my kids had been quite small and went to a race. I wasn't racing. I always tried to race at least a couple of times a year, but there were years where my running buddies never saw me. And then I remember going to a race one year and my kids were at a point where I could, then kind of do a little more of it. And somebody literally said to me, "We thought you might have died because we hadn't seen you for." No, I'm still here.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
running has been in on the back burner for a while. But the cool thing for me, and it's still true, is that if you can participate at whatever level it is, it still gives you the same benefits. I go out now for an easy jog along the river valley, and I take my camera. I get the same benefits as if I was doing a 30K run in advance of a marathon. It's just that idea of getting ready to go out, being out, and whatever worries you might have in your life, they get dealt with. My mind goes into a different place and I deal with it my own way. And I just like your story about, running to work and running back, and people kind of see you doing that and they say, "Oh,
That's just a crazy
that's just
office
the
girl.
crazy person that runs back and forth to work." And I was that person, and I would go running. I was out, the plant that I worked at in Edmonton was out in the middle of the country. And my first thought was, "Oh, this is convenient. So I can go run on the country roads and at lunch." And I literally would be the guy that would go running around these country roads, and people would see me. "Oh yeah, that's just the crazy guy that runs at lunch." But that was just how it was. You fit it in and you get the benefits from it. And people may join you, they may think, "Oh, I'll try it," but that wasn't the world back then. Now everybody's into it, and I think it's fantastic. I love it.
Hmm.
I know when our kids were small, we had one of these newfangled running strollers, and we put one kid in, and then I'd go running with a child. There was no like running on your own anymore. I go running with a child, and then maybe I'd stop at the house, and then I'd exchange children and take another child and go,
Your shit.
or
Yeah.
maybe I would hand over the stroller to my wife, and she would run with the smaller child to have less weight to push. And that
And
was the way we were sort of getting it in. I was doing tri training, and I was had the bike set up on the outside on the balcony on a stationary trainer, and I would just pedal. And I had the baby monitor mounted on my handlebars, and the baby was asleep. And
yeah,
then I would hear noises or crying. I'd have to stop, towel off, run upstairs, get the baby, and that was how we were fitting it in. I mean, and
well,
of course, your competitive 10K race time doesn't really hold up under that type of training. But that's how you get through.
you have to be content with the fact that maybe sometimes your running performance isn't where
Yeah.
you'd like, and
Hmm.
sometimes that's a problem. Like you really know and think you can do better, and you really have to find a way to make it all work. But
It seemed to me early on in the Kelly family that Steve was the person who developed a passion for running, but your brother was actually the person with the natural talent.
yes,
Yeah.
that pretty
God,
much sums it up.
God can be cruel sometimes.
Hmm.
Um,
That's
I,
and well,
I was waiting for a showdown in the book.
yeah, there
I was
There
was a
was
lot
waiting.
almost
that wrote
one.
I was waiting at some
about it.
stage. Okay, at some stage, Steve's going to get trained up, and then he's going to figure it's my moment, and he's going to try to.
I did try. But as well, I won't maybe give away all the stories, but that one, I was as close as I was ever going to get. So I challenged my brother. This was years after we moved away from Hamilton, but it was going to be the big showdown. But I think it was karma that said, "You will forget your running shoes at the house," and the showdown will not
Yeah.
happen. And I'm sure he would have beat me, but I think I might have been close that day. But my brother was is I don't he doesn't run he doesn't compete as much as he used to, but he
Okay.
really was a phenomenal runner, to the point where he could run anything. I mean, he was on 100-meter relay teams that won Ontario championships. He was on the, he would win 10Ks all over Ontario, and he could run just about anything. Um, and so kudos to him. There was a number of years where I will admit I was rather jealous about his superior running ability, but that did soften over time, and I had to accept that that's just the way it was. And to be, to be kind of maybe thinking in the bigger picture and so whatnot, and tying into the other part of the story, I started to wonder if that was just, the strokes that came later, and we're going to talk about that obviously, but whether I had just been wired differently or plumbed differently than he
Yes.
was. Maybe that ultimately set a limit on how good I was ever going to be.
Well, at the end of the day, with everybody, genetics plays a part. But in your
Yeah.
case, you actually had sort of some MRIs to show you exactly where genetics
Yes,
was.
there was that didn't come around till much
Mm.
later, but I now wonder, and who knows? No one will be able to tell me, but and it doesn't matter at the end of the day. I've told this story a few times since my mom passed away last summer. So but I am glad she read the book before she passed, and I'm glad about that. But the funny thing was, because well, I won't say she raised us by herself because my dad was there, but she did
Mm.
95% of the raising of four kids. And so she had a lot on her mind. But she read the book, and the first thing she said to me was, Steve, I didn't really realize that you were a runner at all. It's like, Mom, like, come on, like, I've
Oh,
run
wow.
races for 50 years. Like, I was a runner. Well, I thought Paul was the runner and you were the student, and like she had us all
Boxed
compartmentalized.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I guess like she was probably, I mean, four kids, like she was probably just always in kind of survival. And also like some
Really,
of the kids ended up being sick. So
yeah,
like yours.
my sister had a serious illness. My dad he was like the fifth kid in a way, I suppose.
Yeah. Maybe you want to talk about that because he was an alcoholic and he was an alcoholic, I guess, your whole life until he died.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's funny when you do set yourself the task of writing a book, which was fun to do, I have to say. But I started seeing things in a different light when you look back. And my sister got sick when I was 14. She was 15, and it was serious, like cancer, and a nasty cancer, terrible diagnosis. And my dad, who always had been a drinker, I think that was too much for him. Like he really just, that's how he coped with it,
Mm.
was turning more to drinking. And so things got a lot worse after that for him. He struggled with that mightily for the rest of his life. And unfortunately, the burden of all of that fell onto my mother. So she was, I don't know how she did it. Like she kept us all going. She put food on the table every day. She managed the house, the finances in the house, which I still don't know how she did that. She found money for me to take guitar lessons, and like we all had our little diversions and so on. And it was, you sort of realized later how like this person, my mom, was just a saint. Like she performed miracles somehow.
Hmm.
Have all of us end up on the right path, like all of us turned out okay, and we talk about running and how I got into running, and it was really the traits that she kind of instilled in me, this idea that, sorry, I am going to get emotional at a few times when we talk.
All good.
This idea that, you work hard, you do the job that you have to do.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That was clear from what she did. My dad was more, he was kind of a bit flighty, like he had interests. He was an interesting guy, really. And he was curious about a lot of things. And so I got this curiosity for different things from him. And so I picked up all these things from them. And that really did help a lot when I thought about running or how I was going to succeed in running or life in general. You have to kind of approach things in a way. And I distilled it down to three things: be curious, be diligent, and be humble. Like, never forget that you came from kind of humble origins. And you guys know, like, if you run a race and it doesn't go well, that's a humbling exercise, and you can take learnings from that and try again next time. And that was really, well, like I said, I'm just glad my mom got to read the book before she passed, because I think she did. Um, she didn't like to read about herself, but
Hmm.
really got a lot of the credit for what all of us accomplished. I mean, it was really to me, it was an homage to her.
Yeah, to some
Yeah.
extent, you can see that.
I also find that, despite, your father's kind of, I guess, shortcomings, he
Mm,
was an alcoholic, and I guess in a lot of ways, like you said, the fifth child.
yeah,
But at the same time, it seems like, like you in the book, you seem to have, I guess, forgiven him because you talk about like the good things that he gave you.
yes,
And you don't focus so much like, yes, you mentioned he was an alcoholic and some of the things that, because he was an alcoholic that your family went through, like your mom having to basically carry the burden of the whole household and all that. But how hard was that to sort of, I guess, develop like just the ability to see him, I guess, for the good things he was able to provide and not focus so much on his flaws because like you were the child, so I guess you were probably angry and disappointed
yeah,
for a long time
very much.
before you were able to.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. I mean, I moved away. Like, my siblings were all still in Hamilton or close to Hamilton, and so in some sense, I got away from it, and I didn't
Hmm.
I didn't mind being away from it. It I wouldn't say I tried to avoid it, but I didn't have to deal with it every day. Like, my siblings were, faced with the challenges of my dad, and he had a number of health issues as well, some of which probably were related to the drinking, and it was tough. But I can, to connect it to running. I mean, I years later, after he had died, in fact, I mean, I never, I don't know if you say forgave him, but I certainly came to peace with his situation. It wasn't my deal, it was his deal, and unfortunately he needed help, and eventually that he got it, but it was, a difficult situation. But and again, it all came kind of onto my mom as the caregiver, for most of that time. But I remember running it was just after he had died, so it was 2010 Victoria Marathon, and that we talked a bit before the podcast about coaching, and by then I had hooked up with my coach, my current coach. She's still my coach, but she would give us these little tasks during a marathon. So keep your mind on the job and take your mind off the pain and all that. But
This is Coach Janice, is it?
Coach
Hmm.
Janice,
Okay.
yes. And the task was, you have to kind of dedicate the next mile or whatever to someone. And so that I picked my dad. Said, well, because by then I had kind of come to peace with it. Like, he had recently died, and I'm going to dedicate this mile to him. And there I am in the middle of a marathon, and I'm okay. Now I think about dedicate the next mile to my dad, and I kind of burst into tears in the middle of a marathon. It was the wrong thing to have
Mm.
done for me. Like at that point in a marathon, you really don't want to be dealing with it, but it was a bit of a
Cathartic
watershed
moment.
moment because then I was at peace with it. So I did accept him for all the good things he gave me, and I let it go. Like,
That's probably helping you a lot
Mhm.
as a person, but not really helping your marathon very much.
no, it didn't. But that did turn out to be one of the best marathons I ever ran
Okay.
because of coach. I give Coach Janice all the credit for that because she, as I like to say, taught an old dog new tricks. Yes, you can still improve even if you're a 50-year-old dog who thinks he knows it all.
Yeah.
Well, you don't really. And there's that thing, be humble again, because you can always learn something. And so I was so happy to have hooked up with Coach Janice, and I'm still with her, and
Something that Liz and I were both interested in um, was the acronym that Coach Janice gave you for running. Um, the acronym self-talk,
yes,
which comes up in your book.
yes,
Now I'm gonna get, unless I can find the question here, I'm not gonna be able to.
Oh,
See. Oh, here we go. So self-talk,
yes.
self being smooth, easy, light, fast,
Yeah, now you might recognize that
and
one.
talk being tall, arms, lean knees.
Yes. So it's running, well, the talk is yeah, tall arms, lean knees, and so it's running posture, like you're trying to
Okay.
have a tall posture, lean a little bit, knees, so we do that even in our workouts. We'll do a session with short pickups and we'll say, okay, focus on,
Do a posture check. Yeah.
arms, good arm carry and all that. So it's really handy in a marathon because you can sort of remind yourself when things are getting tough, like self-talk. So you focus on arm carry and just really focus on that posture. So that's the talk part. And smooth, easy, light, fast. That actually comes from Born to Run. If you remember that story when he's and I can't remember exactly the details, but the Caballo Blanco and he's running and he
Hmm.
reminds himself smooth, easy, light, fast. So even though my running form isn't perfect, I can sort of picture myself looking very smooth and light, running nice and light
Mhm.
off my feet. And so I imagine myself looking better than I do when I run. But then the pictures tell the real story.
Oh, but I'm sure that it's better. It's always better than it would be without the self-talk,
Absolutely.
right?
That's
So
all
I
we
mean,
can
it's all
do.
about improving like what we have now.
A little bit better. That's all you can hope for.
Yeah, I just want to talk about Coach Janice's tips some more because this idea of having something to think about during the marathon, like a plan. I've heard this before because I run with I ran with another girl that we ran together under John with. Um, maybe you've probably heard of Melanie Myrand
I
because
know
she was,
Melanie. I met her. I ran with
yeah.
her once. Yes,
Okay, yeah. So because I think her and Dan were training partners
they
for a
were.
while.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, like she had once told me about this idea of dedicating a kilometer to somebody for every one of I don't remember how many of the last kilometers, but tell us about this race plan from Coach Janice because it sounds very similar. It was like partly a dedication and then partly like just picturing yourself being like a great runner.
Well, I mean, Coach Janice. Now, just so you know, she's an Olympian, so she went to the Olympics 3 times as a race walker. So, I mean, I knew her. I knew of her in Calgary for years, and I always kind of admired her from afar. Like, okay, because I know she's an Olympian.
Hmm.
Now, we've been together coach, and well, we're friends obviously, but for 15 years or so, we've been together, coach and athlete, and now more than that, because I help her coach the club. And but I mean, it's this idea that you always have to go into a race with a plan, and so she could very easily, her big skill, because she has a degree in psychology as well, so
Oh, that's a useful thing to have.
figure out her athletes, and so she could figure out that the best thing for me, because I'm a task-oriented engineer, she would give me tasks. So we would work this out as a plan. She would let me think that I was part of this, but it was really her imposing this on me. I joke about that, but
A good
yeah,
psychologist
good psychologist. She
will
would make
always do
Yeah.
that.
me think it was
Yes.
my idea.
Make you believe that you thought of it in the
Yes.
first place.
But as an example, like she figured out that if she gave me a job in the middle of, well, in a race, then I would get to the end and I would feel like I had checked all these boxes. And by the way, I had avoided worrying about all the pain that I'm in. So, for example, like she would say, I want you to do 4 sets of like 3 times 1. So do 3 hard K and then one, reward yourself with an easy K, and then do this, several times in the middle of a marathon. And wouldn't you know it, like, and you start doing this maybe at kilometer 16 or something. So you've gotten past that easy bit, and then you're doing all this hard work, and then you have the reward at the end. Like you have this little dedication and inspiration and imitation, like pretend you're Steve Prefontaine or whatever. So you reward yourself at the end, and then you feel the draw of the finish line. It's like a whole process. And so we'd work, write it all out and memorize it, and think about your nutrition and all that. Like it's simple stuff, but it really does pay benefits. So now, of course, we're helping other athletes, and I love it. It's just this idea that, why didn't I think of this before? I could have had a better PB, years ago. When I used to go into a marathon and just try to hang on for as long as I possibly could. Nobody knew how to run a marathon back then. Um,
I mean, it's true because it's advanced a lot. Like it
Absolutely.
used to just be about training, and now, we're finding out, well, yeah, but it's also like the nutrition can have an impact and the psychology, like huge. But it's kind of recently become mainstream. I wasn't always, so.
I tell people, like, because I have in my club, in my group, I have a reputation for being very good at like sense of pace. Like when I was competing, I was always the guy who would like lead the repeats, the intervals, and people would always say, "Oh, run with Steve because he's got a really good feel for pace." And I would say, "Yeah, that's because I started running before there were watches." Like,
Yep.
so you had to actually
Yeah.
work
You have
on
to
that.
actually understand your
Yes.
body. Yeah.
Yes. So anyway,
Now you outsource all of that
yes,
to your Garmin.
well, that's what I say to people. Like they trust their GPS and their Garmin so much. I just like turn it off, take it off,
Mhm.
like get that feel for pace here, and then your watch is just there to support you rather than dictating.
It actually makes me laugh when they're like, "Oh, the race was too long." What do you mean was too long?
Yes,
Oh, my Garmin
oh,
said it was
that's
like
my favorite one.
5.2
Yes, I
kilometers, and
know.
I'm like, "Yeah, but the race course was measured with a
Yeah.
measuring
Yes,
stick
I
three
know. I had
Yeah.
times
The
one.
Garmin's wrong.
certified. Your
I had
Garmin
one
is
app.
wrong."
I got a quick anecdote. I had one athlete that I was helping to coach, and we would go to the Olympic Oval in Calgary. That was our winter training spot. And we were going to do so many laps, and
Okay.
whatever the intervals were. She would keep going after the finish line. And I would finally say to her, like, what are you doing? Well, my watch says that the 800 repeat ends over there. And I said, do you not think this is a measured track? Like, oh, but my watch is telling me the 800 ends over there. No, like the marks on the track can be trusted. So
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I literally would take her watch at the beginning of the workout and I'd say, like, here's what you're gonna do.
Oh, funny story. John used to do that to us. Sometimes
All
we
right,
would we would
good.
go to the track because he would want us to like we mentioned feel pace.
Feel
And
the
so he would take all our watches and
Yep.
make us run the intervals without knowing how fast we were
Like
running.
John
And he would
better.
only
I
take us.
like John already.
Yeah, yeah, you would have liked John. And then like he would be yelling the times once we crossed the 400 or the 800 or whatever. So we had to basically like figure out
Mm.
if we were going fast enough or not. And then if we were going too fast or not fast enough, then the next rep you would have to try and adjust
You
just
gotta,
enough.
you gotta figure it out. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing a lot.
Liz and I have played a pacing game where you wear your watch, but you're not allowed to look at it.
Yeah.
And then you wait for your watch to beep on the auto kilometer. And then
Mm.
before you look at the watch, you have to say what you think the pace is. And then you look at the watch and you see whether
Good
you're
exercise.
above or below, and then you adjust and you go again for another
That's a
K,
good skill to have.
which is
Hmm.
a fun game if people want to play out there, play along. Um, a couple of things in your running in terms of events. Um, you have a sort of love-hate relationship with the Boston Marathon. I'll come to that afterwards.
Mm.
But one event that I saw that fascinated me was the Jasper to Banff relay, which seemed to be sort of a club or a team event, um,
Yes.
which uh, for people who don't know where Jasper and Banff are, is a fabulous piece of countryside to run through. So that sort of intrigued me, and
Yes.
a relay event because it's got to be a hell of a distance between Jasper and Banff. So, what was all this about? Tell us about the Jasper to Banff relay, Steve.
For those who don't know, it's probably one of the most beautiful roads in the world. So that's a nice place to run for sure. And between 1980 and about 2000, the race was literally from Jasper to Banff, so it went all night. There's other races that have kind of similar character, like the Cabot Trail Relay is similar and might have been uh, kind of modeled after the Jasper Banff Relay. But for a time, it was a world event. Like there were people coming from different countries to run in it, and it was a monumental thing. I mean, you had all these teams, everybody was all, kitted out, and
So, for the uninitiated, we're now in the foothills of the Canadian Rockies, basically.
we're right in the Rockies. So
Yeah.
this is a challenging route with a couple of mountain passes to go over. So there's ups, downs, and flat parts, and any kind of weather. It was a monumental event, and by the time I ran it, first time was back in the late '80s, and it was well established by then as a huge race on the calendar, and I was just thrilled to be a part of the Edmonton Roadrunners at that time and run on their team. And we had a mixed team, and it was um, it was probably one of the best weekends of my life. You went to this race, and I didn't know what to expect, but you fully immerse yourself in this event, and you're cheering on your teammates, and then you've got to keep in mind that your turn is coming and you have to preserve some energy. And my stage, which was, I kind of joke about it in the book a little bit, but it was stage 13. So it was was it an unlucky stage? It probably did have a bit of that because it was the middle of the night. There was a thunderstorm that
Oh
opened
boy.
just as I took the baton. There was a grizzly bear warning. Um, it was a severe downhill stage. So I'm running downhill in the pitch black and in the rain. And I kept seeing shadows in the ditch. And was that a shadow of a bear? Like it was just crazy.
Every shadow is a grizzly bear.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, it was exhilarating. I'm holding up. And for me, the thing about these relays is they're great because you feel totally dedicated to your team and you have to You don't want to let anybody down. So my tendency was to go out way too fast, and then I would pay the penalty. Um, but on the
How
other
far would
hand,
each runner run? How far would you
how
run?
far?
Yeah.
Well, it was that rate in those days it was 17 stages, and so each stage was probably 10 was the shortest and 20 was the longest. And so
In
various
Ks, in kilometers, or
in Ks, yeah, it was
yeah.
all in Ks. And some of the stages were incredibly hard, running up the Bow Summit and then running down the Bow Summit. The next stage would be like straight downhill. But we were challenging in that very first one that I ran. We were challenging for the lead as the mixed team, and we were duking it out with this team from the United States, and all night and all the next morning, and you just felt like you had been through a I don't know, a campaign of some kind when you got to the finish line. And it was just I got the bug that year, and I did run it a number of times after, and then the Kananaskis relay is the one that has continued. The Jasper Banff relay got reinitiated as the Banff Jasper relay, so it still goes on, but it's no longer that, point to point thing. So to me, it's lost a little bit of
Hmm.
the kind of the monumental aspect of it, where you start at A and go to B.
Yeah.
Right. Um, it really was one of the greatest running experiences of my life, and it solidified running as just this great thing that I was involved in.
And how many legs does each runner do? Is this like you need to find one runner, so you need basically like if
Right.
there's 17 legs, there's 17 runners, or
Most teams were 17, but there were some teams that literally were five guys, and they were just
okay, so you could
like
do it
Cycling
like
round. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
it
like a
varied, but most teams were full 17 runners. So imagine just 120 times 17. That's a lot of people converging on Jasper, this little town in the mountains, and but that just added to the whole flavor of the thing. I think it in the end it was too big. The Parks Canada said, "Well, we need to
oh,
up
okay.
this because it's just too much
Hmm.
Too
strain on."
many people. Yeah, we've done for a few years we were doing a kind of a relay, but the idea was more to have kind of like a group of a certain number and you'd cycle the runners so
Right.
they'd all be in the same van. It's called the Peak to Brew relay, and it was like a bit the same idea where you start in one
It's
place
it's
and end in
basically through the
another.
Adirondacks.
Oh yeah, I think
Yeah.
there are a number of these. I did a blog piece on it, just these relays. There's a number of them that have, I think, picked up the idea, and maybe it's been around for a long time, but in its heyday, I would say Jasper Banff was probably the king of the heap. It was a beautiful race and really just a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, it was nice to read your descriptions of it, and yeah, felt my juices flowing as I was reading it.
Good. Well,
Clearly,
that's
Yeah.
like my
yeah.
whole idea with the book was to say if you're a runner, I want when you're reading bits like that,
Hmm.
I wanted you to feel some of the same things I was feeling. And if you're not a runner, I wanted you to know, and people have told me like when they read say the Boston Marathon piece, they literally have told me, well, I am not a runner, but I felt like I was
Yeah.
there with you. And that's what I want. That's what I was trying for. That's what I was actually
Yeah,
hoping.
the relay bits made me want to go and do this relay.
Yeah.
Good.
So that's why I like, you know,
Go run that. Well, like you mentioned,
but maybe in like I don't think I could get together 17 people, but
you
we could have like a car of five and then
there's still the Kananaskis relay, and they're always looking for people. So,
Mm.
come on.
Makes a note.
yeah. As Alan is madly
Yeah,
scribbling on
you
his
should.
notepad.
Well, I mean, please come
We'll
out.
we'll propose it to our club.
All right.
Yeah, having done the Boston Marathon, I mean, I was able to quite accurately visualize some of your efforts, and um, often at Boston, I've 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 run it a few times, but I don't think I've ever run it really successfully.
Hmm.
And I'm usually smashed by the time I get down
Yeah.
off the last hill. And
Hmm.
then everybody says, "Oh, you should just then open your legs and sprint home. It's flat.
Coast in.
It's flat and slightly. That's where you should really turn up the burners." What burners?
Right.
I'm completely
Yeah,
dead.
right.
Um,
Devious.
so, but one of the things I did notice is that in your description, you were very, you actually pointed out the lake that you run beside in Boston, and
The
I
one that
thought,
I never saw. I only
and
ran
I
Boston
thought to
once.
myself, ho ho, Steve has saw the lake because we were actually in a discussion about the Boston Marathon for one of our other books, and Liz and I were both in Lake Denial.
Oh,
Um,
that it didn't
so
exist.
Oh,
yeah,
like there's no lake.
somebody said,
Yeah.
and you go along the side of the lake, and I said, no, 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 hang on. I've run I've run 7 Bostons now, but at the time I think I'd run 6 Bostons. And I said, I've run Boston 6 times. There's no lake.
I think it's, I would say, well, I don't know who's going to get,
The lake's
I
absolutely
think it's
huge.
generous to call it a lake.
No, but it's yeah, by Canadian standards, yes, but
Yeah.
um it's actually quite a huge lake. I kept an eye out for
It's a
it.
body of water. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Um
Boston.
it goes to show if you're not paying attention, you can miss
Yes.
huge milestones.
Yeah, I like
Um
lakes.
you had a fantastic Boston in 2001, which I think inspired you enormously. Um
Yes.
um and then I guess to bookend the Boston Marathon, you ran the 2016 Boston Marathon with your son, Daniel. Um,
Well, I have to say,
but it
we
didn't
didn't
really
run
go to plan for either of you.
with him, but
No.
it's up the road from me.
Yeah, you were running on the same marathon as
Same
him.
marathon, yes. But it, no, and that one, I mean, I finished. It was just a survival one for me, but that didn't turn out as it was supposed to. And well, I won't go into all the details, and Dan probably doesn't like me talking about it, but it didn't, I wanted to celebrate with him, and that didn't happen. So
Mm,
I feel like for him, he probably has unfinished business in Boston, which I would love to go back to Boston just to see him succeed by finishing the race. But that day it didn't quite work to plan. So I don't know if maybe he wasn't happy that I told the whole story in the book, but to me, it was also important because I got some learnings from it and
mm,
kind of led to the next chapter, which I suppose we're going to talk about. But my health issues. But it was important to say, okay, there's been a transition here. Like I'm kind of on the decline and
yeah.
he's on the rise and he's still knocking out great running achievements, which I'm very happy for. So I feel like I'm now living through him a bit, which
Hmm. I feel like Boston, though, is not, you know, I remember, so I've only done Boston once. It was in 2011. So I think we were on the starting line,
yep,
probably together, maybe in the same
yep,
wave, because I'd qualified with a 3:15 and I can't remember.
yep,
Yeah, I can't remember what you qualified with that year, but I think you were there.
I was, yeah.
But when Coach John was explaining Boston to me. Like you hear all these things about the hills and whatever, and he was like, Heartbreak Hill, like it's not that big a deal. Like it's not a
Mhm.
big hill. It's fine. You get a nice like downhill at the beginning um and so sort of like on paper, I guess you can say, well, Boston shouldn't be that hard.
Mhm.
But if you like compile all the stories you hear, I would say there are more people that have like I won't say a bad day, but like their best times are usually not Boston.
No,
Um,
it's not a personal best kind of course by any means.
yeah. So it's interesting. So like I don't know, like I think that Dan shouldn't be that disappointed because
No,
it
I think he's come to terms with it. And
yeah.
honestly, he ran Vancouver this year in a time that puts anything I've done to shame. So you
Oh,
know.
Yeah.
wow.
But
That's
also
cool.
I get the unfinished business part. Like I keep
Yeah,
saying I'm going to go back to Boston so I can,
I think he should. That
Yeah,
would
yeah,
with it,
excuse
with
me
perform
the,
better.
as a
But
with,
total spectator, which would be fun to do. So,
it's always a great weekend. I've just signed up for 2026.
oh, good for you. Yeah. I mean, and Boston's one of my favorite cities, so I love going there, and I don't have any plan. Well, it won't happen anyway for me now, but running it again is not in the cards, but that's okay. I'm more than happy to let other people do it.
Yeah, I haven't had my acceptance yet, but I think I have enough buffer. I have about a
so
1 hour buffer on the qualification
Oh
time.
yeah.
so next year you can get Dan to sign up so you have an excuse to go watch the 2027 Boston Marathon.
Well, I'll leave it to him to decide when he goes, but I'd like to certainly be there to see totally spectator mode. And I like well, I said this the other day because we were in Edmonton for the for the marathon and the half marathon championships a couple of weeks ago, and he ran the half marathon and did really well. And so my second favorite thing to running is to watch running. So um,
Okay.
You're probably having
Um,
fun watching the World Championships at the
oh
moment then.
yeah, for sure.
and you also now have this photography hobby. So do you also like bring your camera to races and
Oh
photograph
yeah.
all the runners you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely do. Like any local race or when we went to Edmonton, I mean, I always have my camera with me, and when I'm running too, I carry a small camera now that fits into a waist pack. So I'm always ready in case there's a photo opportunity. So yeah, and I now define this as my second running life. I had my first running life up till the strokes, and then I had to reinvent my running life. And so this is my second running life. And it's in some ways more satisfying because I'm still running, and
Hmm.
I have this thing I call photo runs where I do leave the watch at home and I just go out and take pictures or
I
let
might
it,
try that.
and then I have this ability to coach my group. Well, coach, I mean, I say assistant coach, whatever, but it's nice to be, to still be appreciated and they don't mind having me around. So that's good. So
Yeah.
it works. It kind of has three legs to it, and they all kind of pretty satisfying. Run with my wife, which I never did before. So it's all pretty nice.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about the reason that you kind of transitioned from your
Mm.
first
Yeah.
running
The,
life to your second.
the
So,
stroke in the title,
Yeah.
stroke of
mhm.
luck.
Yeah, which that title is fantastic, by the way. But anyway, let's talk about the stroke.
It's kind
Okay.
of not a stroke, is it? I mean, it's not a classic, what we would
No,
see as a classic, one-off event. Um,
no, it's not. And
mm,
to maybe tell the story, 2017, I was actually in a 10K racing, and at that point I was committed to racing. So I was serious and I was racing, and I had an episode of vertigo in the middle of the race. And it probably lasted a couple of blocks, but I was literally unable to put one foot in front of the other, almost doing a face plant. And then it passed, and I was able to finish the race. But I sure didn't know what that was. But as many of us would do, well,
you shrug it off.
it was a
Mm.
hot day, you weren't drinking enough water, you were pushing too hard, all that stuff. Um, put it aside. And then I was having these odd episodes in my office or working or whatever. I'd had these odd uh, visual anomalies, things in my vision. My ears were doing weird things. And this literally went on for weeks. I had a number of episodes of vertigo while I was running. And then one morning I woke up and the thing was, and this is why I'm doing this, frankly, is because I talk to people and I ask them, do you know the signs of stroke? And they will say, yeah, I've seen the commercials and the billboards
Yeah.
fast, right? Face, droopy face,
Yeah.
arms, you can't lift your arms up. Speech is slurred. So if you have any fast face, arm, speech, T is time. Don't waste any time. Call 911. And I say, good, that's you're getting the message. But I kept thinking something's wrong. Maybe it's a stroke. And I would do the little fast checklist and I would say, well, you're not having a
That's all
stroke.
good. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's something else. But oh well, whatever, carry on. And then one morning I woke up and I just said, something's not right. So I talked to my wife and we called 911. And and by the time the EMS guys were at the house, I was feeling better again. I said, I don't want to waste your time. Why don't you guys just forget about this? And they said, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Once we're here, we're going to go through with this. So we went to the Foothills Hospital in Calgary, and I didn't know what to expect, but it put me on the path of strokes. And when they explained it to me, I didn't even know what they were talking about. It's the vertebral arteries, which are at the back of your neck. And the most strokes are the carotid arteries,
Mm.
the big arteries that are kind of at the front of your neck. I'd never even heard of a vertebral artery, but that's where my issues were. And so I've become a little bit of a amateur anatomy expert. I know a lot about the vertebral arteries now,
And you
and
know a lot about strokes too.
I know much more than I ever thought I would. But the the whole point of talking to groups, which I really enjoy doing, is telling them, okay, the symptoms of stroke from fast, but that's the carotid arteries, and that's
Yeah.
where most stroke admittedly occur there. But just be aware, there's other issues that can come up. And my particular situation was related to the vertebral arteries, and I was having vertebral artery strokes, now mini strokes, whatever you want to say. There's things called transient ischemic attacks. So that's when you have the symptoms of a stroke, but they don't last very long. So yes, I was having spell of vertigo and then it would pass. And by the time I got into the hospital, essentially what was happening, the vertebral artery was getting more and more plugged. And by the time I got into the hospital, it was fully plugged. And
Hmm.
so I was having these things like now they're starting to happen, one on top of another. And
Hmm.
by the time I left the hospital, the effects were pretty noticeable. Like I couldn't walk around the block without feeling like I was gonna fall on my face. So it was, there was a spectrum. So yeah, I wasn't as bad off as some stroke patients, but I was certainly not myself. And it was a process to get back to even walking. And even, for a year or two, I would have these spells where I just had to like lean on something to feel get my balance back. It was and the issue is the vertebral arteries, the ones at the back, control things like coordination of your body. So how your body moves through space or how your eyes focus on something, how your ears hear things like in a unified way. Like I was
Mhm.
having screechy kind of random noise coming in instead of, sound that we
Hmm.
recognize, and weird things with my eyes. So I mean, it controls some pretty important functions that we take for granted, and most people have no idea. So, well, what I try and do now is tell people like the acronym is FAST, but in my research, I've learned that some stroke centers are starting to actually use a different acronym, which I've adopted. It's called BFAST. So BE, and the B is for balance, and the E is for eyes and ears. So if you're having
Oh,
balance or eyes and ears, that could be a stroke. And I would like after I wrote the book, and now I'm reading on, online, you see, okay, well, stroke centers are starting to say, well, if you change the acronym a little bit to be fast, then you catch all the stroke symptoms. So that's become my little mantra when I talk to people. And if I'm talking to runners, it's quite cool because I can say, be fast. And
Yeah.
well, they're trying to be fast. So it's easy to remember. And it covers pretty much all the stroke symptoms, including the ones I was having. But you have to, maybe say with a bit of caution, like there are a lot of other reasons why people might have spells of vertigo and so on, but don't,
Hmm.
show up at the stroke ward or at the emergency ward if you're having a spell of vertigo, but it could be, as it was for me, it could be
the
strokes.
beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it common also to have, because you had these spells, but they would kind of come and go really quickly. Is that common thing, or is that maybe
Is
like due to
I
the
think
fact
it's
that you're an
common.
athlete or
I think
something?
it's common, but here's the real miraculous part of this, and honestly, it's the thing that kind of for a long time it kept me up at night just thinking about this. But again, I'm sorry, become a bit of an amateur anatomist, I guess is the word, but
Yeah.
we have two vertebral arteries at the back of our head. They join up into one artery that actually goes into your brain. And so it's like, as I think about it, the system is actually designed pretty amazingly. So you have two, but they join up and they go into your brain as one artery.
Hmm.
And that's for redundancy. So if you have one
Yeah.
vertebral artery that's cut, then you have the other one as backup. Here's the problem for me. My left one does the job. My right one does something else. Like it doesn't actually join up with the left one. So if you think about it, I rely totally on my left vertebral artery.
Yeah.
That's the one that's plugged. So now, how am I still here? Like, why am I still alive?
Yeah.
The reason is that running all those years, my body figured out that I had a problem with that artery and it actually built arteries around
Sort
the
of a
block.
bypass system.
I have what's called collateral arteries. So, and they actually ran an angiogram on me and they could see this in real time. It's a video that for a long time, I couldn't look at it. My wife looked at it and said it was pretty amazing to see the blood actually coming up to the blockage and then going around the blockage because I had these collateral arteries that had built up from all those years of running.
Except that this was not like a blockage per se. It's just like an anatomical defect that you were born with, right? Because the
Um,
artery
No.
just doesn't.
No, a
well,
blockage.
they
Oh,
don't,
it's
they
around
don't
the
know.
blockage. It's not around the other side that didn't
Well,
connect.
they told me when I first went in, they could see that the artery was, they said, partially blocked. And then by the time I left the hospital, it was fully blocked and at that point, they couldn't do anything about it, really. I mean, they could, but usually the thing they do is they put a stent into an artery and open the artery up. And I think that ship has sailed for me because the artery is now essentially blocked completely. And so it will kind of close itself off. But the collateral arteries that are kind of like this bypass system, they said, well, those arteries will get stronger because they're doing the work. And
Hmm.
for a year or two after I left the hospital, I could feel a lot of pain back there. And they said, well, that's probably what's happening. Like the arteries are kind of
Trying to
expanding and
build.
to get you the blood flow you need. Like, and that's the part that boggles my mind. But
It's
it
amazing.
It
it
is
is amazing,
amazing.
and it's well known. Like if there are people that have collateral arteries in their heart, like they have a blockage in their heart, but the collaterals take over the job and prevent them from having a heart attack. I mean, it's
Yeah,
well
that's
known.
what they always said that a heart attack is more deadly in a younger person than an older
Yes.
person, and it's for that reason is because they
Mhm.
usually when a person has a heart attack when they're, 70, they've probably been building it for like 30 years and now they've got all this collateral blood flow
Collateral artery
that's just
development.
developed. Yeah, and so they'll have a heart attack, but it won't be nearly as
Yes.
destructive as somebody that's 40 and has a heart attack.
Yes.
Um,
That's
that's
quite a yes, exactly right. And that is the case for me. And now, I mean, and again, writing the book, I was thinking back over the last 50 years and in 2010, 11, 12, I mean, you talked about the Boston Marathon. Like when I was training for and running the Boston Marathon, I was having terrible pain in that area. And so I would literally, in the middle of a race, I would do these little exercises, like just kept, touching, stretches in the middle of the race, thinking, well, it's
Hmm.
bad posture. I didn't for
hmm
a minute think it was because my vertebral artery was blocked or getting blocked, and I needed to build arteries around that. No one
wow.
had been able to tell me that at the time, but I think that was the first sign that this is happening to you, and this is going to be a time bomb kind of ticking for the
Yeah.
next few years until the strokes happened and the rest of the story. So I mean, I think about it and it used to keep me up at night thinking, well, what if these collateral arteries just
Hmm.
stop? Well, I guess we all go through life with things that might kill us and that might kill me. But for now, I'm just enjoying it.
You're
Enjoying
just more precisely aware of your
I'm
situation.
much more, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost wish I hadn't known, but now I
Yeah.
know. So you
Uh,
just live with
uh,
it.
an observation from reading the book. Um, we talked at the start about, you giving a lot of details about your biography and your upbringing and your background, and we really get to know you as a person. And I think when we got towards the end, and you're going into the hospital with these very worrying symptoms and very uncertain and quite
Mm,
scary things, I think I was sort of terrified for you, um, because I felt I knew you. You weren't. I wasn't reading like a news article about some person that I
right.
didn't know going through some procedure that, okay, I guess people go through
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I was with my buddy Steve,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
had seen how he'd grown up and
Um,
knew you as a person, and now you're in hospital going through what, for me, as somebody who's never met you at this point, was an extremely scary experience. I mean, I found it quite visceral.
no, well,
Yeah.
that was intentional. I mean, I tried to write it that way.
Mm,
You can imagine, because, okay, and I mean, just even in that sequence, that little few weeks of my life that are now very real and kind of scary. I mean, we talked about these relays. I ran in the Kananaskis relay with my team in June. Like I had the first episode in May. Then I ran in the K100 relay in June. We did very well. I was very happy with my time. But, a couple of weeks later, there I am in the stroke ward and I remember sending Coach Janice, a note saying I won't be able to run with you guys for a while. And that's all I said to her. So they were worrying, like, what happened to him? And then I think my wife Deborah must have at least told him, he's in the hospital because then they started
yeah.
dropping in to see me.
hmm
I had a little episode which I wrote about in the book, but you know, she said at one point, let's go for a walk. You need to get outside. And so I struggled. I said, well, what if somebody sees me Oh, no
Yes.
one will see you. So let's go. So we went down the elevator in the hospital. I'm in my gown with my IV, and the door opens at on the main floor. And who do I walk right into but my friend Stephen Wood, Dr. Stephen Wood, who's a doctor up at the Foothills Hospital. It didn't take more than 2 seconds before I saw this guy that
Yeah.
I know and run with, and we'd run in the K100 2 weeks before.
And here you were, your wife was like, "Oh, we won't see anybody you know."
Oh, you won't see anybody. Let's go. So right away, it's like, well, what's your story? But that was almost like the best thing that could have happened because
Yeah.
then he came to see me every day while I was in the hospital. He
Hmm.
was like a confidant. Like he's a medical doctor, so he could give me little, here's something to think about. And I mean, I'm so thankful that I ran into him. But then the word got out. Steve's in the hospital. He's having some weird stroke thing. And so then they all started coming in and seeing me. And it was like surreal. Like, what's going on? Like, how did this ever happen? And how am I going to get out of this? Like, I
Yeah.
was in there for 17 days because the doctors didn't even know what to do with me. Like, the whole thing
Yeah.
still seems unreal. But
And
well, the
and
And
funny
and it
thing
was clear
was,
you went through some sort of grieving process, like a very,
yes, very much so.
very, yeah,
I mean,
sort of initially in denial and
yes, very,
yeah,
all those things. Like, surely this isn't happening to me.
yeah.
And I mean, it was weird even getting out of the hospital because I was, through this process of dealing with the medications, and the doctors initially just put me on this massive regimen of blood thinners. We have to stop this,
Hmm.
so we're going to dose you with two or three. I think I was on three at one time for a short time. But then they said we can't keep you on this because that'll kill you. So it was this year or two of just like, what do we do now? Because like they didn't, even the doctors didn't quite know what to do with me, and trying different meds, and eventually things kind of sorted themselves out. But like you said, it was a grieving process. And then 2018, my other sister, we talked about my older sister, but then my younger sister, Carolyn, went through a horrible cancer episode, and she ended up dying from cancer. And so it was like my life was just
Falling
spiraling
apart.
out down, like
yeah.
what was going on.
And you didn't have running to deal with it
And I
all.
didn't have running. Yes. It was like, how do I deal with this? Because running was always my mechanism. Go and deal with it by running. And that
Yeah.
was taken away too. But I mean, I tell this kind of, it was an epiphany. I read this quote from an English doctor called Thomas Brown. I read a quote from him in a newspaper article, and it was the kind of thing that stopped me in my tracks. And I realized that was the turning point, that I still had control of things to the extent I still was alive. And if I tried to read or say the quote, I'd probably fail because it does get me kind of emotional. But he basically said, life is a pure flame, and we live from an invisible sun within us. So it starts here, and you just have to deal with the cards you've been dealt. It's simple.
Hmm.
Uh, and from that moment,
Simple, but not easy.
not
Yeah.
easy,
Mm.
simple to say and not easy to do. But I realized, yeah, you're still you. Like and now you can try and why can't you try and run? The doctors didn't tell me you can't do it, so go and try it. And eventually, my wife and I we got up to running a few half marathons together. I mean, we don't race.
Mm.
I don't care about the time. I'm more there to run with her, and she's there to keep an eye on me. And we got through a number of half marathons, and that's pretty cool. and I've got the coaching and I've got my photo runs and blogging, I can make my way through this and I'm still here. That's the best part. So,
So you did end up coming back to running, which is a
yeah,
great thing, and
yeah,
you kind of reinvented it for yourself. Like so, we don't want to keep you all day, but
no,
can you tell us about this photo run idea? Because I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh,
well,
Liz is getting her
Yeah,
cameras out
oh,
now.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to carry a gear bag when we go for a training run.
Well, okay, yeah, I'll talk gear if you like, but so yeah, I mean, I'd always liked photography, but this idea that now that I've slowed down a lot, well, it started with walking and again, these kind of little epiphanies, like Deb and I would go walking and see things in the neighborhood that I had never noticed before because I was running through the neighborhood.
hmm
And oh, look at that.
You were going too fast. That
I
was
was
that
going
was the
too
problem.
fast. So, okay, well, maybe you should bring a camera. You could take a picture of things that you see that you used to run by. And it was, I think, my sister Carolyn, who's passed, she was quite a spiritual person. And so I feel like she kind of, she's with me when I'm out walking and running now. And there's been little clues like sometimes one day I was running along the river valley in Calgary, which or the river in the Bow River is quite picturesque. And the sun was rising and it was shining on the Center Street Bridge, and it was just a beautiful scene. And I thought, well, I better stop here because I feel like Carolyn's somehow
Present.
pointing that scene out to you.
Hmm.
Better not miss it. And it
And
happens more than I ever would have expected. And so I think, she's somehow there. And so that was the idea. Take a camera, you never know. And sometimes I get a good photo and sometimes I don't, but it's just this never quite knowing. And if you don't have a camera, you certainly won't get the picture. But so now I've gotten into photo editing and blogging, and I like to kind of put little pieces together that
blogging gives you somewhere to put the photos also, so I feel like it goes together well.
yeah, and I mean, some people have asked me, are you going to write another book? And I don't know, I might, but for now, blogging is a way I can keep writing and I can put a few photos in, especially if it's got something to do with running. Um, and the photo run, I'm actually going to do a piece which I'll forward to you, but it's about this whole idea, run and shoot. Like,
Yeah. I'd actually love to read that. And also like if in your piece you could talk about like why a point and shoot instead of because now iPhones, they take all these great
yeah,
pictures. So is there a reason for the point and
yes,
shoot?
yeah.
Talk about that in your
Oh,
blog.
I will, I for sure, and I'll send you a recommendation. My recommendation for a great camera for that purpose.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
All right.
Okay, great. I can't wait to read that. Um,
And
and so
there's a very interesting photograph on the front of on the cover of your book taken by your wife, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. She
Yeah.
she that photo.
There's a
She's not
good looking guy on the front.
well. Somebody told me I was doing a talk to a group, and they said I look too stern in the photo. But for me, it was intentional. Like I wanted this idea that I'm heading into the next phase of my life. So I kind of wanted it to
To
be
look serious.
somewhat
Yeah.
direct. I maybe
mhm.
it wasn't the greatest photo, but it was intentional. And I don't ever look good in photos. So
But we always think that about ourselves. I mean,
yeah.
think it's a fine photo. I mean, it's a
Oh, okay.
serious photo, but I think
Well,
like it's a serious topic. Like you're
it is
talking
a serious
about
topic.
a lot
And
of things that, you
well,
know,
I have a photo that was taken in the race where I first had um, stroke/TIA, it was just after the stroke had happened. So it's a terrible photo of me, but when I do a presentation to groups, I definitely show that one because I want them
Hmm.
to see like this is a guy who had a stroke a few minutes earlier, and he's not looking great, but he's getting it done.
Hmm. Yep. I
Yeah,
guess that gets the message across that, it's people that have a stroke aren't necessarily like lying on the ground.
no, and,
It's not a prerequisite.
no, and they do show up in all different ways, and and it was humbling to be in the stroke ward for as many days as I was because I could see
Yeah.
people who were much more unfortunate in their like I was able to
Mm.
at least
Yeah.
function, although my symptoms were different. But
It sounded at the end like you were motivated to get out because of some of the people who are in there drive
well,
making your life a bit miserable.
well, yeah, I mean, it was not a place you'd want to be for very long, but
Yeah.
it was an interesting window. I mean, okay, and just to get the little pitch in there, but I didn't write the book for personal gain, but I mean, proceeds from the book are going directly to the Foothills Stroke Unit because I
Oh, very cool.
saw what went on there. These guys do miracles with not very
Yeah.
much resource. So,
Yeah.
and I befriended a number of the doctors. So,
Hmm.
they've been good to me and I want to give back to them. So I've through the Calgary Health Foundation, funds are going directly to the stroke unit. I mean, whatever they need, I certainly hope to be able to contribute to that. And so this isn't about. I would love the book to be a bestseller. So far, it's not, but if it is ever, that'll just mean more good for the Foothills Stroke Unit. That's what this is really about.
Yeah, one of the doctors actually writes the foreword in your book.
Dr. Michael Hill is a runner. So, and well, you know how when you write, well, maybe you've seen a lot of books, so I needed a bit of a blurb.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
for the
was hoping
back.
he would write me a blurb, and he wrote me this wonderful letter, which is now the foreword of the book,
Hmm.
because I think it's clear from this that he saw me as a bit of a poster child for how we should deal with this stuff. And he and I have talked a lot about this, like you don't get to choose. I mean, you can do everything you can to help your case, be active, don't smoke, all these things that we know about, but it's not a guarantee. Like it just
Hmm.
No,
means you're
you're just
improving your odds.
you're just shifting the probability curve.
Yes. And so we
Mm.
had a long talk about this, like, why did this happen to me? Well, it's not like you get a guarantee, but you did everything you could to improve your odds. Yes, it happened to you. And guess what? Stroke of luck. Like you got through this because
Hmm.
you were a runner.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of cases where people are not able to function as well as you have because they weren't active. And so that's the stroke of luck part. It's you were doing everything you could and you got to get the message out. And he wrote that to me. It's a wonderful letter that I wanted people to read. So it worked out really well. And I did get a blurb from a wonderful guy, Trevor Hoffbauer, who's Canadian Olympic athlete, and he was kind
He's
to
a
write
darn
me.
quick runner.
Hmm.
So it's worked out well. I mean, I'm happy with how it all turned out. So
So,
So if our listeners want to get themselves a copy of the book, do you want to direct them somewhere
is
or
there a preferred place that
yeah.
you can get maximum proceeds to go to the Foothills Hospital?
well, well, I mean, the easiest if you're not in Calgary, obviously the easiest is an online purchase, but um, conveniently, if any independent bookstore can certainly order a copy. Um, I mean, it's easier than me. I could certainly send you one, but that tends to be kind of expensive. So
Yeah.
through any independent bookstore, you can get a copy. And and it'll work the same way. The proceeds come, as a royalty to me, but that will, just go right to the foothills anyway. So it gets there anyway. And online is probably the easiest. So
Hmm.
it comes to me as a royalty, and I don't need the money, so I'll put it that way. So it goes where it should go. Um, so yeah, I hope people get something out of it. I would love it to be, well, and the book started and finished as an homage to running. Like you guys, I like reading books about running and about runners. And the challenge became, can you write a book that tells what running means to you? And I took the challenge on, and I feel like I achieved something. And then I had this story to tell around the strokes. So, well, and to hear, well, Alan, you said you felt a connection while I was going through it, and that's the nicest thing I can hear as a writer. Like I
Yeah.
wanted people to
Yeah, you're
say,
obviously doing your
It,
oh,
craft
that's right.
correctly if that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted people to feel some of the things I was going through. So I feel like I've succeeded, and I've had some very nice responses from readers which tell me I did the right thing, putting it on paper. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your time today.
Good
It's
stuff.
been great.
We're going to give our 3 or 4 line summary that we always give at the
Okay,
end. If you want to hang around for that, Steve.
sure.
Should I go first? Mine's a little bit shorter than yours by the looks of things. Um, so, Stroke of Luck by Steve Kelly, or Stroke of Luck, My Life in Amateur Athletics by Steve Kelly. I guess the book's a testament that life is not a rehearsal. Um, it's not a practice for something. You should go out there and give it your best shot, and grab opportunities, and maximize your opportunities. And I think we see not only did Steve do that with his running, but also with his career. We didn't touch on his career much, but he actually has a quite a an intense and very active and productive career, and to some extent sacrificial career. Because I know what it's like if you move countries and you go to foreign places, um, what sort of effect that has on your family, and it's very disruptive. And there's a lot of moving parts that need to get fixed doing that. And we see Steve cupping and grabbing what opportunities he can while grasping with the consequences of those things. Um, so that's pretty interesting. I talked about the front cover of the book, which is an action shot of Steve looking slightly serious about his running, taken by Deb, his wife, who's also a key character in the book. Um,
Very much so.
yeah. Who's the book for? I think it's for people who like running biographies or memoirs, um, but also people who might get benefit out of some of the key messages, which are, I think it was said in the book, take care of yourself, look after yourself, and keep running. Those are the sort of simple messages that the bottom line. Your story will be different, but if you take care of yourself and you keep running, um, you'll have a good chance of coming out on the positive end.
so I guess I'll just start by saying that the most surreal experience happened about 50 pages from the end of the book when I started reading about this son that ran in Montreal with the club that was affiliated with McGill University. I was like, hang on, Dan Kelly. Wait, I know him. So that was it was just one of those like, wow, the world is such a small place moments. And it really is. Like sometimes, you just never know. Um, and turns out that there's some connection to this author that we're interviewing today that lives all the way in Alberta. So that was pretty cool. In terms of the book, if you're looking for a justification to continue running, then this book will definitely give it to you. It's proof that exercise can add years to your life, regardless of genetics, and also it likely adds life to your years. Because, if Steve wasn't a runner, maybe the strokes would have left him worse off than they did. And he's we didn't really talk about it. It's talked a lot about in the book, but he doesn't fit your idea of what a stroke patient looks like. Like he doesn't have any of the sort of the long lasting the effects that we hear about, the paralysis and uh, you know, so he walks perfectly fine and he talks to us perfectly fine. There's nothing that you could look at him and say like, oh, this guy has had a stroke. So, whether that was running or luck or a little of both, I mean, I think at this point, like no one's going to argue that exercise isn't good for you, so keep running. The way Steve tells his story makes you realize that every decision can be both good and bad. So, he moved to Alberta for his career, which means like that was good for his career, but then he was far from his family, and he talks a lot about that in the book. Some of that is hard because you're not there for all of the little things, like his dad who was dying and his mom, like he always had to fly to go and see them. And so it was hard to be that far away. And it was similar to, you know, he made a choice to go to England, bring his family for a couple of years for work. And so it was good. It was good for his work and he had experiences that he liked, but it was also a time that they had to adapt as a family. And so basically every decision you make is, it's not always straightforward. You just have to make one and then you just need to see it as as to try and see the good things and deal with the bad things. And I feel like Steve and his family seem to have been able to do that. Um, it's never just one person. It's always a team effort. And I feel like Steve really does a good job in his book of highlighting that, it was like his wife. His wife was responsible for a lot of things and got them through a lot of things. And yeah, it was it was also, I guess, he talks about an homage to his parents, his mom especially, but he definitely is appreciative of all the people that surround him throughout his life. If there's one thing I got from this book, it's that it's important not to lose hope when you know it's a rough patch.
Some patches are rougher than others.
They are, yeah,
Yeah,
and
you,
I think that he had a few rough patches, but I think hope is always the thing you have to get through them because it's not a guarantee, but like if you lose hope, then you lose kind of the motivation to keep trying and putting one foot in front of the other. And I think that Steve had to do that a lot.
To
Just keep the hope.
some extent, running teaches you to do that as well, to
I,
keep
I,
to
yeah,
carry on.
that's actually a good way to summarize it. I would say running is, to me, is a hopeful activity. Like you're always trying to improve yourself and even just, well, the activity itself has ups and downs. It's not all runs are good and not all training sequences pan out, but
Mm-hmm.
in essence, it's a hopeful activity. Like I always want to be doing the best I can at this point in my life. And it's kind of it's a proxy for life in a lot of ways.
Good closure to
Mm-hmm.
the episode. And we'd just like to say thank you, Steve, for the book, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Alan and Liz. It's been wonderful chatting with you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thank you to Steve for spending time with us today and providing copies of his book to us. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or suggest a book you'd like us to review in future episodes, please leave us comments on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter or X we are reviews_running. Please follow us on social media so you can find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you'd like to help us out a little bit, one of the things you could do for us is spread the word about our podcast, tell friends about it, share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. You could also leave us a review on Apple Podcast, or give us a rating on Spotify out of 5 stars. If you'd like to see a little bit more about running book reviews, you could go to our Buy Me a Coffee site, go to buymeacoffee.com, look for a creator called Running Book Reviews, and you can see some various blogs and photographs and outtakes from podcasts to your heart's content. That's all for us from Running Book Reviews for now. Bye for now.
Bye.